Hi guys, it's Sam from Raggedy Bits. I'm just going to jump on here today to share with you the pumpkin project out of our DIY surprise box this month. As you can see, I've already base coated the the four parts of the pumpkin, which you'll see how I put this together in a minute. So I've just given it 2 coats of the brook that's in your kit. And then I've just made a bit of a wash and stained the top of the stalk. So next up, what we want to do is we're going to just use that little bit of raw silk that's in your kit, and we're going to stencil the pumpkin faces. Well, they're not really faces, but the parts of the pumpkin. Okay, so I've just got a little bit of foil here. And I'm just going to pop some out onto the foil like so. This is a really handy little trick so that if you do put out too much paint, you can kind of like cover it up and it will stay okay for, you know, sort of a couple of hours until such time as you use the paint again. So in your kit you'll find the Damask stencil, which unfortunately I couldn't get in any thicker stencil material, so you'll find that this is a little bit flimsy, but it does work. The only thing that you'll need to make sure that you do is just use a little bit of painter's tape if you're not comfortable holding down your stencil so it doesn't move. Okay, so this is the Damask stencil that you'll see in your kit. I wasn't able to get due to COVID, they're having a few problems getting in the thicker mailer for the stencils. So I did the best I could with this particular mailer, but it is a little bit flimsy. So what I recommend that you do is just use a little bit of painter's tape to hold it down in position when you're stenciling. That way it won't sort of bounce about. But because I've been stenciling for a little while, I don't generally tape mine down, but I recommend that it's because the first time you're using it that you sort of use the painter's tape to hold it down, and I'll show you how to do that as we go along. So what I've done is I'm just going to do the 3 blocks at one time because the stencil is large enough to cover the 3 at a time. So I'm just going to gently line that up, just making sure that they're all straight. And you'll notice that it's just not quite long enough, but if you wanted to, you can come back in and just add a little bit at the bottom and the top, or just sort of like line it up at the top, and there's about probably, oh, you can't see it, sorry, just at the bottom of the stencil. There's probably about 5 mil, maybe 10 mil, yeah, just here you can see. But you can just come along and add a little bit more, or you can just center it so that you've got equidistance from the top and the bottom. I think that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so once I've got that all lined up, just taking the sponge out of your kit, and holding in place with one hand, remembering just to dab off the majority of the excess of the sponge, and just go on lightly over the Damask stencil. And I thought it'd be a bit of fun to sort of gear away from the Halloween orange, black and yellow, and I've gone a little bit more neutral, so that if you wanted to, you can leave this pumpkin up all year round if you wanted to, or just bring it out at winter time or Halloween. It just you know, sort of fits in a little bit more cohesively with your decorations if you don't happen to decorate for Halloween. So I'm just dabbing on lightly, and I'm just moving my hand around And you will notice that it will just lift a tiny weeny bit, but with not too much paint on your sponge, it won't bleed up underneath the stencil. Just making sure that you keep the sponge close to the wood and you're not doing the big pounding sort of action. If you don't feel comfortable doing it all at once, you can just do one block at a time. If you feel like it's a bit too big of a space to cover. And you will be able to use these stencils over and over again. So if you've got another project that you'd like to put the Damask stencil onto, you can go ahead and do that. Just make sure that you lay, when you're storing it, you lay it flat. And you can wash your stencils up just in warm, soapy water. And you should get, you know, quite a few different, not different, what am I trying to say? You'll get quite a few uses out of it. But once the thicker mailer comes in, I'll obviously start cutting the stencils in the thicker one. But they still work. And I'll show you a few different techniques along the way, so we can use sort of like different colors to add sort of like a bit of a 3D effect, which is kind of cool. And you just want to be super careful that you don't obviously move the stencil about. Okay, so if you want it to be sort of like more defined, like I'm happy with that. I'm not sort of going for a really crisp image. I would leave that to dry, come back and line my stencil back up again, and then go over again. But I'm just happy with that look. So I will let those dry. Isn't it a pretty pattern? So we'll let that dry and then just come back and do the single one, which we'll use on the back of the pumpkin. So just lining that up again. Actually, I might use the side one. And just repeat the process. So yeah, you don't want to load up your sponge too much, because otherwise it will bleed up underneath the stencil. Just little dabs, and not too much on your sponge is the trick. Okay, so once you've done all 4, you just want to flip it over and now come along and do the back. So it's the same again, you just line up your damask. Just make sure so that it's not upside down. I suppose it's not going to matter if you're at the back. So just doing that again, you just repeat the process of like you did at the front. Just line that up. Okay, so that's all done now. I'll just give that a quick dry. And now at this point, this would be where if you wanted to distress your pumpkin, you can go ahead and just do, sort of like do the edges. I'm going to leave it plain so you can see what it looks like, but I also have another one that I'm going to make that is distressed, so you can have a look at both versions. So now we're going to assemble the pumpkin, and what you want to do, we're going to do it like so. It's going to be a little bit tricky. You're going to need to probably have an extra pair of hands maybe, or just something to hold up these other 2 pieces of wood, the ones that are on the side. Sorry, I'll move that forward just a little bit so you can see. Whoops, just a little bit too wide, aren't we? Okay, and here we have the stalk. So essentially what's going to happen is that's going to go up underneath. Can't see it, I'll turn it around this way. So that's going to go up underneath like so, and then the pumpkin's going to be put together like that. So it's okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get our wood glue. I don't think that, like, you can use a glue gun if you want, but I want my pumpkin to stick together for a long time, so I'm just going to pour out a bead. I've just got a paddle pop stick. You can use a plastic spoon, whatever you like. Just make sure that that's all covered, and I'm just going to stick that down onto the pumpkin, and then I'm going to do another bead up this side, and another bead up that side, a little bit on that as well. The more glue the better. Just spread it out a bit so that taking your first side bit, be careful not to bump your stalk, and then the second one, just making sure that it's all aligned properly, because otherwise what will happen is when you go to stand your pumpkin up at the bottom, if it's not even, it's going to fall over. So you can do a couple of things. You can get a ruler just to move that up a bit, just to butt up across the bottom here, shifted that a bit. This bit's a bit messy, but we'll get there. So I'm just going to then now put a whole stack on this fourth piece because I want it to stick nicely to the whole piece, these three pieces. Oops, that bit's just fallen. Okay, and then you just want to pop that on top. Wipe away any excess glue that you might see. Just make sure everything's straight. While the glue's still wet. It's a little bit of fiddling around, but you'll get there. So I just use a baby wipe. To wipe away any excess glue that you might see. It's going to be a bit tricky to see on the other side because obviously you don't want to move it while the glue is still drying. So you could use anything that will just slide up underneath here if you're worried about these side panels here falling. So you could use sanding block. No, that's too thick. Just got some scrap wood here that I'll just slide up underneath here. Okay. You can adjust your stalk to any sort of level, any sort of size that you want as well. So if you want a taller one, you can. It's entirely up to you. But once you're sort of all happy with it, oops, keep shifting it. As I said, this is a little bit of, there's a little bit of fiddling around here, but while the glue is still drying, you've got a bit of a chance to kind of like move it around a bit. Okay. All right, so I'm just gonna let that, I'll probably let that dry overnight, just so that it doesn't shift about. And then we'll come back and we will tie a little bit of jute around the top to embellish it. Okay, so now that that's all nice and dry, so I'll just hold that up for you so you get a better idea of how I've put it all together from standing up. So it stands up like so. And now we're just going to just add a little jute bow around the top. Just grab my scissors. You could embellish it with ribbon if you have some scrap ribbon if you have some lying around. The possibilities are endless. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. It's very long on the screen, so I can't get it to stand. Oh, there we go. There we go. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on how to make your own little pumpkin. If you wanted to, you could stencil alternate pieces of wood so it's not all damask. But what I'll do is I will take a photo of them for you so you can actually see them staged, both the plain one and the distressed one, and post it in the tutorial page over on my blog. In the meantime, I will catch you live for the tutorial on the gather sign over on our Facebook page shortly. All right guys, take care and we'll see you soon.